Thank you, everyone. It's great to see 86 people online. That's absolutely fantastic. Yeah, as Cade mentioned, I'm hopefully going to introduce you to a part of the ocean that you may or may not have visited before. It's probably one of my personal favorite parts of the ocean, and hopefully by the end of the talk, you'll understand why. But first, I thought I'd better cover who am I. My technical title is I'm a senior lecturer in quantitative marine ecology at IMAS UTAS, but the unofficial title is probably more of a fish nerd. I like counting fish and then using some statistics to understand why the fish are living where they're living and how that's changing through time. I grew up on the Mornington Peninsula, so I'm a Victorian. I grew up diving all over the peninsula in the heads. I completed my undergraduate degree with honours down at Deakin University in Warrnambool before making the move to the Big Smoke and, as Cade said, completing my PhD at the University of Melbourne, where I did a lot of work down the Gippsland Lakes all the way through to Malakuta. And then since then, I've had various roles at such as Murdoch University in Fremantle and the New South Wales Department of Fisheries. So, so what is mesophotic? So you've heard this term mesophotic now. It probably doesn't mean anything to you, but meso is referring to mid and photic is referring to light, and it's describing the part of the ocean where light is limited. And we're seeing a transition in our rocky reefs from algae and kelp dominated reefs, which you're probably more familiar with when you're snorkeling and diving, to more sessile and vertebrate dominated reefs. And these are generally occurring in depths around 30 to about 150 meters of depth. But this varies depending on geography and light availability and water quality and whatnot. You probably are more familiar, or you may refer to them as sponge gardens. Anyone who's done any diving in the Port Phillip Heads, there's some amazing sponge gardens. This is an example of one of these mesophotic reefs from Tasmania. I took this photo. It's about exactly 40 meters depth. There's a lot happening in this photo, but I think it's just a really good demonstration of these mesophotic reefs or sponge gardens, or I'm starting to call them the cold Victorian or Tasmanian coral reefs that rival the Great Barrier Reef. And there is a lot happening in this photo. We've got lots of soft corals. These big orange sea whips are a type of octocoral. There's sponges, and you can even see that there's about three or four strands of kelp or eclonia that is still growing. It's not doesn't look very healthy, but it's still growing in 40 meters of depth. And then off to the side here, we have a infamous Centrostephanus or long spined sea urchin, which is one of the range extending species, which is actually causing a bit of harm in eastern Victoria and Tasmania. And you can actually see on this wall here where it's actually gone along and it's actually eaten all the sponges off the wall. So why mesophotic reefs? Why should we care? What's so interesting? If they're out of sight, they're out of mind. Well, the actual physical spatial coverage of mesophotic reefs is actually much larger than shallow reefs. So the area of 30 to 150 meters depth is obviously a lot larger than sort of less than 30 meters depth. And if you enjoy seafood, this is a very rough number, but approximately 70% of Australia's fisheries are operating in catching fish and crayfish at mesophotic depths. And there's plenty of research out there that's demonstrated that this is a unique functioning ecosystem. And there's ideas that have been thrown out there that these deeper reefs are actually acting as refugia for climate change. So when the shallows are getting too warm, fish are moving down into these mesophotic depths. Now, this is still a very hot topic, excuse the pun. It's much debated. There's growing evidence that these mesophotic reefs are also undergoing and experiencing warming waters and climate change. They're also important because back in 2018, the Australian government announced a network of Australian marine parks all around Australia, and many of these marine parks start at the 3 nautical miles, so that's the state limit. So state waters go out to 3 nautical mile, and then these Australian marine parks extend out over the continental shelf and quite often into the deep abyss, but they are covering and protecting many mesophotic reefs around Australia. So Some of us might not be able to dive. Most of us might not be able to dive beyond 30 meters. There are some keen rebreather mixed gas divers who go down to 100, 150 meters. No surprises. We're not allowed to do that for work. So we actually use cameras and robots to collect imagery to help us count the fish. And on the left-hand side here is our probably our most common and most standardized method for sampling at these depths. This is called a baited remote underwater video. There's basically a metal frame with two cameras, and I've just cut off there's actually this end of this pole, there's a bag of bait where there's 1 kilo of pilchards, and that draws the fish in front of the cameras. And then we count the fish. And if we collect enough samples across a large enough area, across various habitats and habitat types and structures and depths, we can get an idea of what fish are living where. And if we repeat this through time, then we can track differences. So it's very similar. You're probably very familiar with the Reef Life Survey, which is a standardized approach for sampling shallow reefs. This is probably our version of sampling, a standardized method for sampling the deeper reefs. Then on the right-hand side here, we have an underwater drone or an underwater robot, or scientific terms are a remotely operated vehicle or ROV. And so just like a drone that you're familiar with flying in the sky, I have a remote control on the boat that's connected to a laptop, and I can pilot this across the sea floor, and it collects imagery, and we can bring all this imagery back to the lab, and then we can sit there and count the fish and relate the fish that we see to the habitat that we see. So we've done lots of work now on these mesophotic reefs, and we've done comparisons such as comparing to the shallow reefs to the mesophotic reefs. And what we found is that there are noticeable differences, in that these mesophotic reefs are unique. However, we are seeing a lot of the shallow reefs. So this is the common Mado, which if anyone's dived in East Victoria or New South Wales, they're probably very, very familiar with Mado. In fact, they're even moving down to Tasmania now. Everyone's moving down to Tasmania, including the Mado. But it's more commonly associated with shallow reefs, and we're seeing these Mado now in 120 meters depth. So we're seeing a lot of these shallow water species occupying these deeper reefs. So I do have to apologise. I just got back from a mesophotic reef survey at Coffs Harbour, where we went out. We're working with the Gumbungia Rangers, the Sea Rangers, on our marine parks branch, and they were helping us do some bruvs. And I took all these highlight videos from the bruvs and ROV. But as Kate mentioned, I'm in Townsville, and I left the hard drive in Hobart. But I did manage to find this clip. That hopefully work, that will demonstrate some of the footage that we collect. What you can see here is there's a snapper feeding on the bait. We can see some Venus tuskfish. There's a pearl perch up here. As I said, we've got these mados. This is in about 60 meters depth. But you can see there's a really vibrant fish life. What we actually found, which was really interesting, that so fish like snapper, which are really popular recreationally targeted species. If anyone in the audience who's a keen fisher and might struggle to catch these snapper at a legal size, what we found is that there were more fish above the minimum legal length in these deeper reefs compared to the shallower reefs. So maybe instead of being a climate refuge here, that maybe they are an important refuge here for fishery targeted species. Got another highlights reel. This is from some earlier work that I did off Port Stephens in the Hunter Marine Park. This was a few years ago. We actually used blue light to minimize the impact on fish assemblages, so that's why it's looking blue. And now there's a white light. You can see this is the eastern rock lobster here. We see lots of leather jackets, again, more snapper. You can see the habitat here. These are all soft corals and sponges. Lots of these ocean leather jackets, or sorry, these are velvet leather jackets, sorry. We do also see lots of ocean leather jackets. You see the eastern wirra here. And this was a nice surprise. This was about a 3.8 meter male grey nurse shark, which is critically endangered species. And so we've actually seen quite a few of these grey nurse sharks living and inhabiting these deeper reefs. A little bit shallower now. This is in about 40, 50 meters depth. So we're seeing lots of these yellowtail scad. Anyone who's a fisher may use them as bait. And then here are the ocean leather jackets. There's some nanny guys. So the ocean leather jackets and the nanny guy, which are these red fish in the background. These are fish that are more mesophotic specialist. And here's a bit of a highlight here. This is a 1.8 meter baby shark, a baby white shark that scared the living daylights out of me when I was watching it back in the lab, and it came swimming at the camera at a million miles an hour. We estimate that shark's probably only a few months old. It probably was birthed off the continental shelf, and it's on its way into the shallower waters of Port Stephens, where it will live and feed off fish that live in the surf zone. Lots of little baby wobbegongs, some more velvet and ocean leather jackets. As you can see, really vibrant habitat and really vibrant fish assemblage. So it is a pretty special part of the world. And if anyone gets a chance to dive on these reefs, I do highly recommend it with the appropriate training and equipment, of course. And then so that was all baited remote underwater video, and this is what the ROV footage looks like. Oop, it's just frozen on me. Let's try that one again. There we go. Rough. This one doesn't. Let's try it again. Okay, I can just flick through it and you get little snippets. Oh, here we go. Now it's working. So lots of brim. This is what I call a fish bowl here. This is about 40 meters of depth. Lots of old wives, lots of red morwong, lots of stripies. Just amazing fish life. And this is actually a natural urchin barren in New South Wales. So this is where the Centro Stephanus has gone through and pretty much eaten everything on the rocks, and that's why those rocks are looking bare. And in this part of the world, that's a naturally occurring phenomenon. Now we're down into 85 meters where there's no kelp living at these depths. And now we're seeing all these sea whips. These are all octocorals and sponges on low relief reef. In fact, this was a seabed of sea whips that was coming out of the soft sediment. So there's likely a layer of reef underneath with some soft sediment, and these sea whips are growing through. And then we see these large boulder reefs. There's oh, now I've forgotten. I've been put on the spot. What sort of? It's a species of boarfish, and I can't remember what boarfish it is. It's not the long snout boarfish, but it's another one of the boarfish species. And you can see these reefs are just covered in all sorts of corals and sponges. Down to 105 meters. This is about the limitation of our ROV because it is a very small and cost-effective ROV. I'll call it. I call it the IKEA of ROV because it comes flat packed and you have to build it yourself, but it makes it affordable and easy to use. So what now, or what research am I working on now? The main focus of my research is trying to understand how climate change and particularly marine heat waves are impacting these mesophotic depths. I've teamed up with some oceanographers from the University of New South Wales, and they have evidence that these marine heat waves are going well beyond 200 meters of depth. So while many thought that these deeper reefs might have provided refuge here from warming waters, there's growing evidence that these marine heat waves that the southeast corner of Australia has been experiencing is actually penetrating quite deep. In fact, that's what brings me to Townsville. I'm up here to look at doing some marine heat wave experiments with the Australian Institute of Marine Science. Um, but the majority of the focus of our research is around those Australian marine parks and trying to prepare the marine park managers to better understand how climate change is impacting these deeper reefs that are often out of sight, out of mind. So thank you very much for listening. There's my email address. I'm happy to take any emails or questions now. I've done some shameless plugs with some social media. I'm a bit slow on the social media, so please excuse me if it takes me a day or two to get back to you, but please feel free to reach out if you have any questions. So hopefully I've introduced you to the wonderful world of mesophotic reefs, aka sponge gardens, aka the Great Southern Reef's coral reef, which is far better than the Great Barrier Reef.
Nice. And you're saying that sitting at the Townsville airport.
Yeah, I know.
You're a brave man,
No,
Joel.
I was gonna say
Yeah.
no, I'm not. No, I'm not. Yeah. Those
Coming for
pretty
you.
pretty reef fish.
All right.
Yeah,
That baby wobbegong's probably the cutest thing I've seen for a long time. That was amazing.
yeah, cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
Um, I've got questions for you, but I'll save them to the end. So there's one here from anonymous attendee. Is the fish counting performed by AI, or is this still something that's like down the track in the future?
It's getting there. Yeah. So we've on another project we've teamed up with some researchers from Griffith University who are in the process of developing an AI model. So it's getting there for the common species. It's fairly easy, like the snapper. They've got a model to count the snapper, but I must admit at the moment it is still manual counting. To be honest, I actually it's like my meditation is counting those fish. So I actually quite enjoy it. So I hope AI doesn't completely take over.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you're going to need to ground truth
Yeah,
some of that at some
yeah,
stage,
yeah,
particularly for
exactly.
the interesting stuff.